Hello. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rowan Neufeld. I'm the events coordinator from McNally Robinson Booksellers in Saskatoon. Tonight's event is coming to you live from Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Métis nations. So a special hello to anyone who is watching from the live stream at home, and to all of you who are here in person. Thanks so much for joining us. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Saskatoon launch of The Apothecary's Garden by Jeanette Lynes. Let's give her a round of applause. So thanks to Jeanette for being here with us tonight. I'd also like to thank HarperCollins Canada for working with us on this launch. So in just a moment, we'll hear from Jeanette. She's going to tell you a bit more about the book and read an excerpt from it. We'll have a brief Q&A, and then we can get to the book signing. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the author. Jeanette Lynes grew up in rural southern Ontario, and she is the author of 7 collections of poetry and 2 novels. Her first, The Factory Voice, was longlisted for the Scotiabank Giller Prize, and her second, The Small Things That End the World, won the Saskatchewan Book Award for fiction. The director of the MFA in Writing program at the University of Saskatchewan, Jeanette Lynes splits her time between Toronto and Saskatoon. And she is here with us tonight, so let's give her a really warm welcome.
Hello, hi everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Great. Well, thank you all so much for coming tonight to my book launch of my novel, The Apothecary's Garden, and thank you to those of you who are joining us on the live stream. I know some of you are out there, and it means a lot to me, and it just means a lot to me to be here in McNally Robinson Bookstore, which is probably one of my top 3 favorite places in the entire world. So this is indeed my happy place, and the happy place of many of the other writers in this room, many of familiar faces and writers I recognize. And tomorrow night, my colleague Joanne Liao is sitting right there, is launching her first poetry collection here. So I will be back. I will be back tomorrow night. So and thank you all for coming, and enormous thanks to McNally Robinson. Rowan has been working tirelessly on this event and all the other many great events for many weeks. And Alyssa is learning the ropes tonight, so great to have you here as well. And I have a few other thank yous. I'd like to thank HarperCollins Canada and the team there. They've just been wonderful to work with. And my editor, Janice Zwerbny, I told her I would keep her supplied in a lifetime supply of frozen lasagna, or I would wash her car for the rest of her life, or however I could show my gratitude for her for believing in the story. And she's truly a brilliant editor, and I'm super lucky that I got to work with Janice Zwerbny on this novel and the previous novel that Rowan mentioned, The Small Things That End the World, that came out with Coteau Books in 2018. She was my editor on that book too, and what a brilliant mind she is. I'd like to thank the University of Saskatchewan and the Department of English. That's an incredible home for me for the last 11 years. The Department of English and the College of Arts and Science, they actually really like creative writers, and that has meant so much to me to feel that kind of support. And my colleagues in the history department at the U of S, I think I probably contacted, one of them's actually here tonight, I think I probably contacted almost half of the history department at some point or another. If you're writing historical fiction, the first thing you kind of think is, I don't know much about this. I need to talk to a historian. And probably if you are a historian, you're probably like, oh, what are they treating me like an encyclopedia again? Yeah, I'm supposed to immediately know about 1860 styles in sneakers, or but they've just been wonderful, and they helped me a lot. I'd like to thank my partner, Mike Heffernan, who may be beaming in through the live stream. Turns out that musicians and writers have a great deal to talk about with each other, and those kitchen table conversations have just kept my momentum going and helped me so much. Well, I never thought of myself as somebody who would write a Victorian romance at all, kind of the farthest thing from that, but here it is. And it's funny what starts a writing project, and I'm just going to read you 3 not very lengthy excerpts after this. I won't talk at you too long tonight, but it is funny what starts a writing project, and it's usually something quite granular, quite small. So the second novel, The Small Things Out in the World, started with a piece of lint, piece of fluff that blew in through a window onto a vinyl record in a teenage girl's bedroom. And, you know, things happened after that to the tune of 300 pages or something like that. The first novel, I was down at Stegner House at East End, really stuck, and sounds really flaky, but I did all of a sudden hear a voice, one of the characters' voices. I was looking out the window from Stegner House up on the 2nd floor. If you ever get a chance to go down there, take it. And the moon is out there, and I just suddenly heard the character talking. It does sound very trippy. With this novel, I'm a huge fan of the late great Canadian poet Bronwyn Wallace, and she passed away some years ago. She spent a lot of her life in Kingston, which is near where this novel is set. This novel is set in Belleville, just up the road. And there's a poem by Bronwyn Wallace that kind of became my mantra, and it's called Common Magic. And I don't know if you're familiar with the poem at all, but it's pretty much what the title suggests. It's the way that our everyday lives have this other dimension that is filled with awe and filled with wonder. And high school kids are learning to recite poetry again, and I love it. So I think it's wonderful. So I went on the internet, and this young high school student from, I think, somewhere in New Brunswick recited Common Magic by Bronwyn Wallace. She's probably graduated from university by now. This was a few years ago, but it just blew my mind. And it took me back into that poem and just the whole notion of common magic. What else is happening? Some of my history colleagues will know I had been researching spiritualism quite a bit. Table rapping and all that all that fun stuff from the 19th century. So that's kind of part of this as well. So those are just some of the, I guess, the contextual aspects of this story. It is a love story. Brief setup, don't need to know too much. The heroine is a 28-year-old woman named Lavender Fitch. She's scraping along to make a living. She's hungry. Her parents are dead. Her father has left things in a state of heavy debt. She can barely hang on to the house. She lives with a young orphan boy, and she has a leaking roof and no money. So things are not too good. She's scraping along by selling flowers from her garden. And also she has some expertise and knowledge in medicinal herbs. So it was really fun researching drugs in the 19th century. I had a great time with that. So our poor Lavender Fitch is scraping along, selling her flowers and, doing what she can to get by. And in the winter months, she has to go out and forage and make crafts and things like that. There's lots of crafts in the novel. A celebrated, famous spirit medium arrives in town with her assistant. And this is kind of really where the story gets lift off. So I'll just read 3 sections, but they're not terribly long. And the first section is mostly novels. Authors will pretty much give you a taste of the beginning because it's hard to kind of jump in later. So this is 1860 in Belleville. What was, a colleague of history told me, then called Province of Canada. That's really confusing.
That wasn't me.
No, that wasn't you.
That was
Yeah, it was. So I kind of skirted around that. Okay. One, along the shores of Quinte Bay, 1860. As Lavender Fitch wheeled her floral-laden cart towards the railway station, the air held a redolence she'd not noted since the circus stopped in their village. Smells of late summer, straw, dried clover, hummingbird regret, expended grist, whiskey waft from the distillery. Mingled with this, tobacco, pomade, cologne, lye soap, mothballs, malodor of ripened bodies too long away from the wash basin. A variant olfactory trail left by the motley souls surging past her on the road, bound like her to meet the train. More people than usual traversed the road. Everyone was in such a hurry, all flurry and bustle and haste. Someone very special must be arriving on the train, Lavender thought, a high dignitary or famous songstress or star of staged melodrama or romance. Royalty? The Prince of Wales wouldn't reach their shores for another week. A moving knot of ladies near Lavender gabbled animatedly, but paraded past so swiftly she couldn't, her breath coming in audible puffs of exertion as she maneuvered her heavy cart, stitch together a meaning. But she didn't miss their fine bonnets, pretty frocks, a stark contrast to her own dreary morning outfit, a darkly matching skirt and blouse, a coal tar bonnet. Those gabbling ladies left Lavender in the dust and puzzled about why she hadn't heard of this illustrious personage due to arrive on the train. But then this wasn't so surprising, given that she hadn't left her garden and house on Pinnacle Street for nearly a week. She'd been busy harvesting herbs, then cutting a sizable area of her flower beds for that day's train's station market. And she'd avoided the shops with their temptations. Her dwindling funds went to soup bones for suppers, ribbon for her floristry. She owed money at Holton's dry goods and groceries. She'd steer clear of it until she could settle her account. And the undertaker still awaited an outstanding sum for her father's interment, now over a year ago. The whole world overtook Lavender on the road, it seemed. Unlike her, the teeming human flock bore no bouquets, nosegays, etc. So even the old villagers who hobbled, bent like pines, pummeled by tempests turned in from Lake Ontario, even the hopalogs veered around her cart, a kind of overgrown wheelbarrow. Also unlike Lavender, they didn't wear vulcanized Wellington boots, 3 sizes too large for their feet. At least it wouldn't appear so, given how nimbly most strode past her, and not a word of greeting. Other days, gentlemen doffed their hats. Fine morning for posy sales, miss. Or ladies hailed her from open buggies. Save your best tussy-mussy for me. Happy messages, please. Lavender knew they meant handheld nosegays, bright little floral clusters laced with herbs, ribbon-tied, the hearts coded idioms. Flowers spoke volumes. Herbs charmed, harbingered, healed. No room for you, pretty lady, she'd sally back. Sweet news only. That day, no doffed hats, no tussy-mussy calls. Horse-drawn buggies and wagons bucked along, resolute, station-bound. A copious rain had dropped down the previous night. Robust breezes in its wake had blown Lavender's garden dry in no time, followed by intense heat. The road, however, remained mud-slicked, plashet-pocked in many spots. Then again, muddiness was its habitual state. Dogs loped along. One mongrel must have just rolled about in a puddle, for it joggled its fur vigorously, spraying mud over Lavender as it flashed by. She doubted even her cart's fragrances could mask the animal's miry, boggy odor that now bespattered her skirt, the sludge marks even more pronounced against the garment's somber shade. People always met the train. Its arrival never failed to stir excitement, creating a bit of carnival spirit. Market stalls near the tracks, Lavender's cart among them, added a pleasant diversion, savored all the more by virtue of their fleeting, improvised nature, as transitory as a rainbow. The train brought a whiff of the outside world. With their enduring mania for the locomotive, the locals had even named it Samson. As for the station, that striking building had stood already 2 years, but its magic endured. fresh as if some genie's lamp had been burnished and buffed anew that very morning, and those limestone walls materialized, conjured from a puff of vapor. There it loomed in the distance, lit blue by late summer's light, like an edifice from some Italianate dream. Indeed, artists often sketch the station's fine design, a symmetry very pleasing to the eyes. It was a prime site for amorous pursuits and marriage proposals, village gossip vined. With its romantic architecture, one could play at being in Italy. But Lavender couldn't afford to indulge in these fantasies. Doing so didn't feed herself and the orphan boy, Arlo Snook. This was summer's last huzzah, the height of floral commerce. Two main chances for profit remained, that day's station market and the Prince of Wales' visit to Belleville. After that, Lavender must scrape by until she could sell evergreen Yuletide wreaths. Following that, a gardener's most melancholic season, winter, lean, colorless months. She dared not think on it. Instead, she fixed her gaze on the train station ahead. We'll just skip ahead a little bit. And the train does deliver the celebrated spirit medium, the Oracle, as she's called, Allegra Trout, and her assistant, Robert Trout. The bulk of floral sales transpired in a crush of about 10 minutes before the train stopped. Then another brief bout after its arriving passengers trundled onto the platform. For several years, Lavender had been able to detect from miles away the train's steamy muscle and pulsing flanges on its twin spurs. She sensed it now, the world's whiff vibrating through her boots. Samson's singular pulse throbbed through her soles. Any instant, they'd all witness the stoked engine hurtle closer. Someone never failed to bellow, "Here it comes! Here it comes!" Samson sped towards them as from a storybook, its locomotive's fiery boom intent, its steam-fed heartbeat palpable. "Keep your hats on, keep your hats on, hats on, hats on." Then the lurch of brakes, treble shrieks as it billowed, slowed, and came to rest. Carriage horses whinnied, rattled their harnesses. The monkey on the grinder's back sent forth a gurgling report. Lavender brandished two of her most splendid bouquets, particularly plush that year, the late roses. She inhaled their incense, holding them high. "Fresh cut posies," she trilled, "tussy-mussies, healing herbs." Several gentlemen hastily bought flowers. Lavender hoped for much more. Her cart was still so loaded, the crowd so populous. Even the jugglers struggled to hold people's attention. Their minds galvanized towards one thing alone, it seemed, the imminent Oracle. Lavender tried a new sally. "Blooms for the renowned spirit medium." A homely man in gaiters purchased a rose he affixed to his lapel. Was that it? Unless the train delivered new buyers, she would have to wheel her flowers back into the village and hawk them like a common peddler on the streets. What if she didn't sell her beloved flowers after all? She'd have lopped their lives, already brief, for nothing. Lavender joined the fleeting carnival, vying for notice among the other vendors. Passengers stepped down from the train, higgledy-piggledy with their satchels and valises. There was even a parrot in a cage. Lavender waved her prize bouquets high. "Sweet blooms, tussy-mussies, herbal charms." Her animated calls melded into the chorus of roasted chestnuts, candy pippins, woven wraps, tallow candles, molasses fudge. If only her cart were situated closer to the tracks, the chestnut, pippin, wrap, candle, and fudge dealers had installed themselves first, preempting her. "That's them," someone shouted. "The Trouts." A lady floated down from the train. She could only be the Oracle. Close behind her, a man disembarked. So I'm going to skip ahead quite a bit. So the celebrated, famed touring spirit medium makes a huge splash in the village, and all the ladies want a hat like hers, and they want exactly the same boots that she has. And she sort of starts a little cottage industry among the artisanal clothing makers. Lavender goes about her business, selling her crafts and flowers, and grows increasingly intrigued by by the Lady Oracle, but also by her assistant, Robert. I guess no novel set in a small town in Canada would be complete without a well-meaning busybody. So this, I read quite a lot of Canadian novels. So this scene is a scene with the village well-meaning busybody. Her name is Mrs. Clement Rose, and she was also Lavender's tutor when Lavender was a young girl. So she's known the family for a long time. And as the well-meaning former tutor slash busybody, Mrs. Rose has come to Lavender's house to get some intel. And it works the other way too. Lavender's trying to get some intel from Mrs. Rose about this spirit medium and her assistant. Who are these people really? And Mrs. Rose knows that Lavender is hungry and strapped for money. So Mrs. Rose comes bearing a stew made from a rabbit. So this is just the last scene that I'll read. The spirit medium performs here on All Hallows Eve, Mrs. Rose. A large crowd is expected. Will you attend? Mrs. Rose pivoted her eyes heavenward. Yes, but only to see the ladies' fashions, many of which copy the oracle's finery, Lavender said lightly, relieved by the topic shift. Fickle though fashion is, it entertains, Mrs. Rose remarked. Lavender heard a snuffle noise outside the parlor window. A rabbit, she supposed. The garden held some late embittered greens. So then, madam, you don't lend any credence to the spiritualist's endeavor, their belief that with an open mind and attuned sensibilities, departed loved ones may be communed with? Mrs. Rose adjusted her petticoats. A portion of the chair emerged. No, Lavvy, I don't. And more than a few people suspect the whole Fox Sisters affair, all that spirit rapping, is a grand hoax. Smoke, mirrors, parlor tricks at best. When we die, we become garden soil. I'm placing this in concrete terms that you, as a floral type, can grasp. The ones in St. Thomas churchyard, like your parents, slumber for an eternity. This is all there is, she added. That's the grim reality. Life is short. Feel what you can. The foyer clock chimed the half hour. I must go. The portly lady hoisted herself out of the chair. I'll collect my cauldron next time. Lavender thanked her guest for the stew. Queasy as the thought of it made her, it was still a gift. As Mrs. Rose made her ponderous way to the front door, she left Lavender with these parting words. Remember, those two magicians may cast a spell, but they're little more than well-dressed actors, vagabonds. Get too close to those types, you could ruin your life, Lavvy. Burn it right down. Then she left. The biscuits Belleville. Lavender was sure of this, felt its presence through all her mother's harp concerts, sensed it in the garden's seasonal miracles. Each time she gazed inside the spiral intricacies of a single rose, felt it often when it rained, fathomed it in the train's distant approach, in the camber of a winged bird's flight, felt it when Robert Trout stood before her floral cart that first day. If only this conviction would uncover the mystery of her mother's gift. She couldn't be in the kitchen where the dead rabbit was, so she sat down beside the empty teacups in the parlor in the horsehair chair recently occupied by Mrs. Clement Rose. She marveled at the body's obstinance, how, even in her keen state of hunger, her stomach recoiled at the prospect of rabbit stew. This was, Lavender knew, not entirely logical. She enjoyed, when she had it, a cooked ham, a roast, or soup made from animals' bones. And growing up, they'd feasted on venison from her father's shooting expeditions with Dr. Minyard. And lately, she'd enjoyed Arlo Snook's fish. There was just something about a rabbit, vulnerable, but for its keen sense of smell. And in the face of danger, its only options were stillness, the hope of camouflage, or hopping quickly, jaggedly. Contemplating Rabbit's tenuous lot in life was interrupted by rain that lashed its gauzy whips across the parlor window, then settled into a lulling drub. Wet autumns weren't uncommon in the Quinte region. Lavender would need to empty the leak bucket if Arlo didn't come home soon. The upstairs bedroom always felt so cold, even in summer, and now more so in autumn. It held the heaviness of death and never failed to depress her spirits. But still she knew the bucket must be emptied. Suddenly, a soothing music reached her, Heard above the rain, a harp song, issuing from the street, she supposed, though while minstrels performed in their village, their tin collection cups never far away, she hadn't noted a harpist among them. Lavender then realized the music derived from a source much closer, her mother's harp on the other side of the parlor. The song was familiar, rendered most prettily, one her mother had loved and played while she lived, that sweet Welsh air all through the night. So immediate, authentic. It was as though Allegra Fitch at that very instant plied the harp strings. The strings moved, but by invisible hands, skilled hands, spirit hands. All Lavender could do was listen, astonished. So I think I will leave it there. And you've been wonderfully attentive listening to these scenes. Rowan, I guess there's an opportunity if anyone would like to ask questions. And while you're on your way up, I want to say too that just to see so many of our writing students here, it's just means so much. And there's a little special thing in the acknowledgement, the back of the book for my writing students. And it's really true, you past and present. There's some here from before and some here just graduating and some just coming in from all over the continent. So you really do inspire me every single day. It's really true. So you can see yourselves there in the acknowledgement. But thank you all for listening, really kind.
So if anyone has a question, feel free to stick your hand up. I don't want it to feel too much like school, but I'm going to come around with the wireless mic just so everyone on the live stream can also hear the questions. Oh, here we go.
Even with the help of the history department, when you're writing historical fiction, you ever end up in the middle of the night waking up and thinking, oh my gosh, what if I've made a historical mistake rather than an artistic one?
Very often, yes. I don't know if everyone could hear that. Do I ever wake up in the middle of the night worrying that I've made a historical mistake? Yes, quite often. And one thing you can be sure of is that after your book is out, I was just telling my class this the other day, wasn't I? After the book comes out, people will be only too glad to email you and point out your mistakes. It's just something in human nature that people will take a great relish in doing this. I've had it not that often, but has happened, and do I appreciate it? Well, I don't know. It's a bit late. The book's out, right? And I often say, well, where were you like 2 years ago when I needed this information so badly? Yes, I do worry about making historical mistakes. And I worked at Banff some years ago with the Canadian writer Elizabeth Hay, and I was just starting to write historical fiction and maybe feeling a little bit of bravado, maybe a bit of hubris, like, yeah, how hard can this be? But she's wonderful, but I'll never forget, she got very stern and said, some things you can make up and some things you have to get right. So, as writers, I think we have these mantras that are burned into us, and they might as well be like tattooed on us, So I never forgot, some things you can make up, but some things you have to get right. So yes, I do fear making mistakes. Probably there are mistakes. And that's a really good question. Yeah, and always for historical fiction, always in play.
Is there a question? Nope. Right. Oh, we've got a lineup now. Okay. Well, because I'm standing closest to you, I'll hand you the mic.
Are there any Victorian authors that have influenced your writing?
Yes. Charlotte Bronte, for sure, right? Before that, a little bit before that, Mary Shelley, hugely, some Canadian Victorian writers, and at the turn of the 20th century, not Victorian, but Lucy Maud Montgomery. Anne is always in there somewhere, but I thought a lot, and I read one of Anne Bronte's novels, and the title escapes me, and it was incredible, the language, the rich language, and there's a hat that a man was wearing in the novel. And I thought, can I steal this? I think it was called a shovel hat, the clergyman wearing a shovel hat or something. So I did actually steal it. Oh dear. You didn't ask about theft, you asked about accuracy.
I'm sure she would.
And lots of 19th century Canadian poetry and lots of romantic poetry, but yeah, I love Victorian novels. I need to read more, and yeah. Somebody else had
We had a question over here.
Hey, hi Dave.
So you've done 3 novels in fairly rapid succession, and unless I've missed something, you haven't published any poetry for a while. Surely you haven't abandoned poetry, have you?
The muse has abandoned me. I don't know if for permanently, but I was telling Julio this the other day, and on the 4th floor of the Arts Tower. The muse, the poetry muse, has not been visiting me very much for the last few years. I've tried. I've got some odds and sods of things in files. I feel like I've cannibalized my poetry to put in the novels, and it's a very strange. I'm not happy about it. Why can't I do both? Well, maybe because there's only so many hours in a day, but I do feel like somehow the novels have sabotaged the poetry, but the toolkit, the craft tools is still there. Like if I'm in a scene in a novel and I think I need to do what you tell your students, use, concrete sensory details, practice what you preach. And then I can sort of feel kind of the poetry, the elements of poetry, like sound and images and alliteration, and like they're here, but they're not as poems. And I was really sad about it for a really long time. I would sit and feel sorry for myself and say, I'm washed up as a poet. I'm washed up as a poet. And I might be. So I don't know. The poetry is not really what's happening lately, but I do feel like I'm kind of cannibalizing it into the novels. If that makes you write both the genres, Dave, if that makes any degree of, you write more than those both genres. Yeah. So,
Any other questions for Jeanette?
So this is a little bit of an inside question, but what made you decide to write about spiritualism? What made you decide to write about that particular thing? And secondarily, what made you send it in Belleville?
well, I address the spiritualism question first, and I'm going to tell you the blunt truth. The research into spiritualism was intensive for about 3 or 4 years in my unsuccessful attempt to win something called a shirk grant. I went everywhere. I have been everywhere. I know, but I've done extensive work in the archives at the University of Manitoba and the Glenn Hamilton papers. That's later, and that's just love that stuff. I'm a nerd, right? So just fascinating. That's later than this time period, but I still think I'm going to do something with that. I went to the Brock University archives. This again more late material. I've gone through all boxes of archival material. I don't know. I've just, ever since I read the story about the Fox sisters and table wrapping, and so many people were it was just such a social vogue thing. Susanna Moody was, having seances at her house in Belleville while her husband was the sheriff. So I did, in a way, I researched for 3 or 4 years, all for naught. I was not awarded the grant, but I thought, well, maybe I can fold this material into a creative project. So there's a happy side to that, I guess. Why Belleville? I spent a lot of time in Kingston, sort of from about 2007 to 2017, and a tragic romance. But that had a good thing to it too. I helped organize a conference on Bronwyn Wallace at Queen's University. I know lots and lots of wonderful writers in the area, and I liked the area a lot. And Belleville seemed like a weird, dark, cool, kind of strange place that hadn't been used that often, and maybe it has, but I like places that seem really uncool, and I like using them in my writing, so it kind of fit the bill. And then Suzanne Moody lived there, and lots and lots of spiritualists hum around the area, so that's also a very beautiful area. Thanks, Joanne.
We have time for one more question if anyone has one.
So if you don't get a grant, just write a novel.
Can you say anything? Hi, Jeanette. Can you speak a little bit? What are you working on now? I'm just curious.
Well, another novel. I'm kind of in a dialogue with my editor to kind of see what the direction of it might be. Seems like women's historical fiction is something that people have some appetite for. So just to be perverse, during COVID, I wrote a very contemporary novel set in 2018. It was so much easier. You didn't have to look up every single thing. What did a toothbrush look like in 1860? What kind of socks did people wear? It was really, really onerous to do all the research. So it's great to set something in 2018. But they think they like the historical. So I guess that one's, oh, maybe my editor is watching. I don't know. But you know, it's all good. It's all practice. It's like going to the gym. So I seem to be really, really obsessed with novels. I love novels, and I do hope some poetry will come back at some point. So yeah, seems another novel, probably historical, women's historical fiction of some ilk. Probably won't do much till next summer. But that's okay. I've got these wonderful writing students to work with in the meantime.
All right. With help if I turn the microphone on. Thanks so much to everyone for coming tonight. And of course, a huge thanks to Jeanette Lynes, as well as to HarperCollins Canada, to everyone who tuned in virtually. Jeanette's going to stick around to sign your books. And if anyone has lingering questions, I'm offering on your behalf. They can ask.
Happy to.
Yes. We've got lots of copies of the Apothecary's Garden available for sale. Feel free to get it signed before you purchase it. Just make sure you stop at the cash desk on your way out of the door. And again, thanks for coming. Let's give Jeanette Lynes another.
Thank you.